many years ago hearing from somebody a description of the book of Mark. And I decided, the book of Mark would be the best one to start with because, as I've heard it described, it is the ADD gospel. It's the shortest one out of all of them. I mean, each sentence is like 6 words at most. It's got your attention. It doesn't stop. It just goes and goes and goes. It starts off with John the Baptist preparing the way for Jesus. So we don't even get the birth of Jesus. We don't get any kind of little bit about him in the temple when he was 12 years old or when he was really young. We just go ahead and just start with the story. Boom, we get going. It's the easiest book probably in the entire Bible to just start it and have no issue running through it. It's quick, it's to the point, and when I remembered it being called the ADD Gospel, I thought that's probably the best thing that we could use. So we've been going through Mark, and we just finished it up this past week. 16 chapters, we took 4 chapters a week, and throughout the week we would read them on our own and then discuss them and go into detail about things on Wednesday nights. And we just finished it up. And after going through the book of Mark, there were a lot of instances that I saw of really one side of Jesus that we always talk about. And it's a side that we talk about in our lives and the great things that he can do for us and all of this great stuff. But 2 weeks ago, we came across a story that almost seems completely irrelevant. It just seems like it's only there just to fill up some space. And after reading it, I thought that would be kind of funny if we cover that in the lesson because it's like 2 verses and it doesn't really hold any weight. But then I was reading a book my dad gave me on the book of Mark, written by another author, and kind of dissecting the book even more. And as it came to this passage, it expanded on these 2 to 3 verses for like 4 pages. And I was like, is there really that much to say about that short of a passage? Is there really? And as I kind of saw it explained in a different way than just me reading it and trying to interpret it, it made so much sense what it was saying. And it made so much sense of why Jesus would have this moment and use this moment as such an opportunity. Because what I didn't realize was after this tiny little section, this kind of off to the side moment happens, about 10 verses later, there's an explanation for it. And then 2 chapters later, there's a whole nother section about it. And so it's kind of like a question of, well, really, what does this mean for us? We can see what it meant for the disciples and what it means for Jesus in their time, but what does this mean for us? And we'll get to that section in just a minute. But first, I just kind of wanted to bring this up, that in our walk with Jesus, and we've all had kind of these moments, and it may take, we may have to rattle our brains a little bit, but every one of us has had a moment where we were saved from something. And it doesn't matter if it was a life or death or danger, physical danger. It can be an emotional saving. It can be a financial saving. It can be a relational saving. It can be any kind of a saving moment that happens in our lives that's only allowed to be credited to Jesus. There are moments that we have where it doesn't really make sense. We didn't do anything special, but Jesus did. God did. And we see that saving moment happen, and it kind of gives us that little boost of faith. It kind of gives us that little extra pep in our step where we can say, well, you know what? He's there for me. He is here for me. He's done this for me despite maybe my mistakes. He's saved me from this even when I was being financially irresponsible. I was rude to a longtime friend of mine, but he has restored that relationship. God does amazing things of saving for us all the time. These moments, these moments are also kind of defined by healing. We can say that so many things in our lives have been healed by Jesus. But this section that I was just talking about a second ago is kind of the other side that we don't really discuss or talk about that much, especially when it comes to us personally. And Jesus, it seems like in almost every chapter of Mark, there is like 3 different instances specifically of Jesus healing someone. There's a little header above the paragraph. Jesus drives out unclean spirits. Jesus heals a man with leprosy. Jesus cures blindness. Mark is just full. Every chapter has 3 or 4 instances almost of Jesus healing somebody. There's healing, there's healing, there's healing everywhere. And you can find that in the other 4 Gospels as well. He is always healing. He is always serving other people. It doesn't matter what's going on. That is what he is doing. But this other side that we see comes in Mark chapter 11. And it really is just 3 verses, 12, 13, and 14. And this section in Mark chapter 11 is called Jesus Curses the Fig Tree. And it's only 3 verses long. And the reason this stands out so much is because after I kind of saw and read about what this really represents, it shows this other side of Jesus that maybe we don't talk about. It's one that, if we have talked about it, we think of it as an afterlife thing. Once we get to the pearly gates, we have this moment here for us. But this little section right here is the righteous judgment of God. We've seen the healing, we've seen all the miracles, we've seen all of it, but the righteous and just judgment of God, something that maybe we don't take too much of a look at happening right now. We think about judgment as mostly an afterlife thing. We think about it as once our time has come and we go up to the clouds and we get to the pearly gates, that's our moment where we are judged for our lives. When we believed, when we made this commitment, did we live a life that Jesus has called me to live? Will I live up to that? Will God say to me, well done, good and faithful servant, right now? And don't worry, this is not going to be a scare you into something message. This is kind of a message of preparation. Because throughout the week as I was looking at this and thinking, this past Wednesday night, there's some stuff there that I would love to share. And it's not just because I feel it's good to share, it's because I need it. I need this. Because I can tell you this past week has been a rough week for me. I've struggled. I've had a lot of emotional setbacks. I've been immature. I've been wrong. I've just had a big struggle week this week. It's a week where most mornings I wake up already tired and already ready to quit on the day. And then this weekend I just had moments where I was not thinking. I let frustration get out. I was saying things that for some reason I was just saying them. And they made no sense for me to say them. They were hurtful words. They were things that I immediately regretted. And I thought, this is just so dumb of me to be acting like this. This is so dumb of me to be acting like an emotional kid who can't control what's going on around him and lashes out and decides to take it out on other people. And so as I kept thinking about this message, I kept thinking, boy, this is something I desperately need to hear myself. This is something that I desperately needed to study this week and hear from God. So God's righteous judgment is something that I feel isn't meant to scare us, but it's meant to correct us. It's not meant to scare you into trying to avoid and be walking on eggshells at all time. It's meant as a reminder. It's meant as a way for us to say, okay, you know what? I am doing something that's not right. I do need to change this. I do need to get back on the right track. I need to start connecting more with God. I need Him to start guiding my path, and I do not need to stray from it. And in Mark chapter 11, we kind of see a different example of this judgment. In verse 12 of Mark chapter 11, we're just going to read these 3 verses here. It says, on the following day, when they, which Jesus and his apostles, came from Bethany, he was hungry. And seeing in the distance a fig tree and leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, may no one ever eat fruit from you again. And his disciples heard it. Kind of a really weird 3 verses right there. We kind of are just going down this path with Mark here where there's no slowing down. I mean, it's just constant. We're doing this, and all of a sudden we take a quick little detour here. And then we just come right back. Immediately after this, we get another pretty famous story of Jesus. I mean, the very next verse is him arriving at the temple and seeing that those inside of it have changed it from a place of worship and prayer into a marketplace. And now they're trying to buy and sell these miracles and blessings of God. And rightfully so, Jesus is angry with it, and he drives them out the temple. And then right after this very famous story of Jesus driving out everyone in the temple, we come back to the fig tree. And there's a section that says the lesson from the withered fig tree. And in it, Jesus kind of explains a little bit more about what he was meaning to this fig tree, because Peter says to him, Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered. And as Jesus kind of goes on with this, there's something that stands out about this moment, and it's kind of at the end of his explanation. He's saying to them at first in verse 22 there of 11, he says, have faith in God, because truly I say to you, whoever says to the mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that it will come to pass, it will be done. And therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive. If you have anything against anyone, so that your Father who is in heaven may forgive your trespasses. This righteous judgment of God is perfectly shown here. And it may not make a lot of sense because it made no sense to me when I read that. I was like, judgment, it's a tree, he was hungry, he wanted fruit, it didn't happen. He's God. He can cause a tree just to wither. I mean, there's no big, deep meaning for it. But as we see that there are leaves on it, and we see that Jesus apparently, as he approached it, he was wanting something from it. As he got there and saw that there was nothing there for him to gain from it, there was no fruit that he needed, he did say, may no one eat from your fruit again. And what I believe is the actual real explanation for this is the temple. Immediately following this fig tree, we get several fig trees. We see these trees that have been planted and now they're in the temple, but they're not producing fruit. They're only in leaf. These people that are in this temple are the fig trees. They're ones who know better. They've been planted, they've grown, they know what they're talking about, they know what they're supposed to be doing, but there is no fruit on their branches. There is nothing people can gain from them unless they are given money. And that is not at all what the fig tree is for. If you go outside and go to an apple tree, you don't have to pay the tree to pick the apple. You don't slip a $5 bill next to the root of a tree and then grab a couple apples and walk off. Makes no sense. Anybody can walk up and just take your money. The fig tree is a lesson for our lives, that we are planted, we grow, and we are meant, we are supposed to produce fruit. We are supposed to take the fruit Jesus gave us. We are supposed to take everything, these words, teaching, and wisdom, and in that way produce a fruit for others. Because I found out something, for several years, it didn't occur to me until finally I was hit in the face with this realization. And it was that if I cannot produce a good fruit for others, then I will find that what I do produce cannot sustain myself even. If I cannot produce something that can be benefited to someone else, not me, but if I am not giving something out that is for someone else, for their benefit, then what I keep for myself in a selfish manner will not be able to sustain me in any way. I will find myself withering because I will have no fruit at all. I will only have leaves. And maybe our fruit isn't given to others, and if someone approaches us, we don't have anything to give, but what happens when Jesus approaches us? What happens if we kind of just keep it all to ourselves, and then next thing you know, Jesus approaches us, and we have no fruit to give? We have nothing in exchange. We have nothing to offer up, nothing to give. What happens then? Because if we can't produce the fruit for others, we'll see we won't be able to sustain ourselves. God will see that. He knows that. God will notice that we may not have fruit, and he will say, well, look, if you don't have any fruit that you can give, if you don't have anything that you can let others grow in or let others find happiness and joy in, that you build other people up and bless other people with, if that's not going to happen, then no fruit. No one's going to eat from your fruit again. Now, this righteous judgment is something that plays a part in a kind of a fun way, not a fun way, but in a very interesting way with the resurrection. And it's very interesting how this idea of us being this fig tree that produces a fruit meant for others, how that plays into the resurrection. But it does, because in Mark 16, right here we see that there are 3 people who arrive at the tomb of Jesus 3 days after his death. And they are here to take care of the body. They are there to clean, do whatever it is, and then leave. But as they arrive, they notice that the stone has been rolled away from this tomb. And they go in, and there they see someone sitting there. And they were saying to one another, this is verse 3 here, or I'll start in verse 1. When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go and anoint him. This is the body of Jesus. And very, very early on, the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. And they were saying to one another, who will roll away the stone from us from the entrance of the tomb? And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled back, and it was very large. Entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed, because you seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen, he is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Now, what I love about this is that the three people here that the news is delivered to at first, three people here that the news was given to that Jesus has risen to first, are three women. That doesn't seem crazy at all until you realize that this is 4,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago. It was a long time ago. In this area of the world, around this time, women were not allowed to even testify in court, even if they had witnessed something clearly. They were given no rights. They were mostly just seen as mothers and wives. That was it. They weren't allowed to go out and do anything else. Very rarely were they given any sort of privileges or special education of any kind. But what I love is that the most important news that needed to be told, the most important news ever, was given to three women. God did not look at them the way society looked at them and said, "You're untrustworthy. I can't leave you with this. I can't." The news of the resurrection of Jesus was given to three people that society would not give anything for. And that is what God does for us. We are fig trees that have been planted. We produce a fruit that is meant for others. And we are trusted with that. We are trusted that when we read these words, that when we study this, and when we make a commitment to following Jesus, that we will produce that fruit. God has given us these words. He has given us these stories. He has given us these miracles. He has given us this history of His people. And we are trusted with that to share with the world. We have this news of the resurrection. We have this news of the Savior, the Creator of the earth, sending His Son to save us, to serve us, to die on the cross for our sins and then be raised from the dead. We're trusted with that now. But are we producing that fruit? Are we producing that fruit? This news and this wisdom that we have to go and tell others was one of the commands that Jesus kind of gave us. It was one that He said, look, this stuff that I'm giving you, all of these words, these messages, these teachings, is meant to go out to other people. It's not meant to be a little collective group here. This is meant to go out to other people. But if we do not decide and make that choice to produce a fruit for others, we're going to find that we cannot even sustain ourselves on it. And it's rough. I love every single thing about what this Bible here means. I love everything about it because every time I open it up, there's something new in it that I either didn't know was there or just completely reminded me and gave me a brand new meaning of something. And reading about this fig tree was something that hit me personally because it was something that I was struggling with. It was something that I continually had dug myself into a deeper hole with. I had no one to blame but me. I really didn't. And it had been that way for years and years and years. And there were times where things got good. There were times where things felt fine. I thought, you know what? I've got a lot of positive momentum here. This is great. And the next thing I knew, I'm back to square one, where I don't really have anyone to talk to. I'm by myself most of the day. I don't have anybody to trust. I don't have anybody around me. I'm feeling awful about myself, and I don't really want to do much. I don't have any passion, any motivation, because the fruit that I was producing wasn't meant for anyone else. What I was producing was simply just leaves. And when people would approach me, they would just see that and think, well, there's nothing really here. I mean, everything you have, you're keeping for yourself. And it would hurt. But to read this and to see that, hey, God knows. And if we do not produce that fruit, He will let us know. Because I've learned that things just don't slide under God's eyes. Things aren't just whatever. There are things we always have to answer for, and there are things that whether or not we own up, whether or not we realize it, or whether or not somebody calls us out on it, or whether or not we just sit and wait, and suddenly something catastrophic might happen that finally gets our attention. That was me. I was the one that was like, I'll come around to it. And next thing I knew, catastrophe. And I'm struggling heavier than I've ever in my entire life. I'm like, well, there's a wake-up call. There's one way to do it. It's not, I wouldn't recommend it either because it's terrible. But one thing that I love about God is that there is no sort of, well, you're done. It's over. You don't get another chance. God loves us. His Son died for us. And His Son was raised from the dead to conquer death, to separate sin, to tear the curtain in two so that there is no longer a separation between us and God. We don't have to be weighed down by a sin anymore, and we don't have to sit there and just think, well, all I am is just a tree with leaves. I'm just a tree with leaves and not fruit. That can change. I've learned that about my personality as well. I used to say I'm just a negative person, but that's not true at all. Personalities can change. They're not permanent. And when I realized that, it was a slow and steady process of changing that. And maybe some of us today, similarly to how I've been recently, maybe we're realizing today that I'm not producing a fruit for others. I only have leaves on my branches. I can't give anything to anybody else to bless them or to help them, because what I do have is just kept for me, and I'm withering now. Jesus is here to change that. Jesus is here to completely flip the script on who we think we are and show us who we really are. He's here to change how we believe we might be and show us, no, there is something in you that I have created for a reason. There is something for you to produce. There is some fruit that you have that is meant to go to somebody. And who knows, maybe one day it is Jesus. And maybe the day that we do have a fruit that is ready to be given to bless someone else, that's the day that Jesus interacts. That's the day we have an otherworldly experience with Him. That's the day where everything can change for us. If you are realizing maybe that there isn't a fruit on your branches, maybe there's just leaves, or maybe the roots are starting to come up a little bit, maybe you feel like maybe you're withering just slightly, I do want to invite you to come down and pray with us, or if you have something maybe a little more personal, we will have prayer teams in the back. But in these next moments, we're going to just kind of reflect on our branches. Really focus in on what kind of fruit am I producing? Is it a fruit that can sustain others, or is it a fruit that won't even sustain myself? If that is something you might need prayers over today, I hope you will come as we stand and as we sing.
Oh God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. Oh God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. I will seek you in the morning, and I will learn to walk in your way, and step by step you lead me, and I will follow you all of my days. Oh God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. Oh God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. I will seek you in the morning, and I will learn to walk in your way, and step by step you'll lead me, and I will follow you all of my days, and I will follow you all of my days, and I will follow you all of my days, and step by step you'll lead